What's up, guys? Four-Wheeler Doctor back again. Hey, tonight I'm kind of just introing a video. We ended up doing a 60% gear reduction in a 300 Fourtrax. I'm gonna end up having, I've got a whole video of putting the whole motor back together, but I'm going to do one just for the gear reduction install. So I'm going to take some excerpts out of my assembly video, disassembly video, assembly video, and the actual gear reduction install, and I'm gonna show it on here. This is a Reduction Boss gear reduction. I'll show it, the actual reduction, in the next video or in the next segment, but just wanted to give you a little intro on it, and hope you like it. What's up, guys? I would like to add one more thing to this video before we get started. When this thing starts up, the engine is off the bike. You do not have to remove the engine to put this gear reduction in. I just already had it off because I was doing a motor rebuild on it, so I started it up from there. Also, the one step I did leave out was the right cover of the engine. The little cover on the right is the 8mm bolt that covers it up. Pull that cover off, and there's 3 electrical connectors back there you have to remove, just barrel connectors. They pull right off, so make sure you pull those off before the cover comes off. And then also to get that cover off, you usually have to take that right foot peg off too. So I'm sorry I left those out, but this is a video within a video, and I couldn't find excerpts of that out of my old videos, so enjoy. Alright, guys, next thing we're going to do is get this clutch cover off the side. First thing on this side is to remove the kickstart. I did make a mark here where the notch is, just so we could get it lined back up on the shaft in the same place. Really not crucial, but it helps a little bit, just to make sure your shifter is back in the right place and it doesn't get hung up on your plastics when you do kick it. That's a 12mm bolt there. Sometimes they can be kind of tough to get off the actual shaft. This one's not bad at all. I pull right here on this side as I tap on this side, and it pulls it right off just like that. Alright, next thing we need to do is take this side cover. I'll cut the camera back on the side. Alright, guys, got all the bolts out. These are all 8mm headed bolts. I had a couple over here that were already loose. They were holding wires that go to or cables that go to the reverse, as well as the reverse light and neutral light and all that stuff. What you want to do here is just take a hammer and tap this cover off. One thing you want to pay attention to is you tap this thing off, every so often you need to come and tap on this shaft here to knock it back in, because it's the kickstart, and it has this got a spring loaded shaft on it, and that thing will come off. It really doesn't hurt if it does come off, but it makes it a little easier if you just not let that spring fly off of there. So just keep tapping that shaft in. As you tap out on the cover, I'm actually holding it with my hand, and it's staying in place pretty well. So just keep tapping it like that. God, I forgot this thing had oil in it. I just poured oil all on the floor. But anyway, we'll deal with that in a second. Looks like my helper just showed back up. Oh, goodness gracious. Well, we better chew that one up. There you go. Alright, so there's your cover. You could hear there's a washer just fell off. This washer here goes on the kickstart shaft. There's also a washer on this clutch lever here. And there's Riker over here stepping in the case that just stepped. Oh, are you okay? Is it alright? Just step in the cover right there. Of all places in this shop, he stepped right in there. Anyway, okay, so that's that. We're gonna pull these. Grab me a Ziploc bag. We're gonna pull these pieces out of this clutch here off, and this nut here doesn't look like it's ever been. No, just a smaller one. Staked, but one time. This motor appears to have never been taken apart before, which is very good. Hey, along with that washer that came off of here, there's also an O-ring right here where the oil tube comes up. Make sure you hang on to that too. Sometimes those things get stuck in these covers, and sometimes they don't. So, alright, we'll start taking off a few of these parts just while I got it here. This piece, triangle shaped piece with the 3 balls in it, this whole arm here. We'll pull all that off, put it in a bag. We'll get the bearing and the bearing holder out of the change clutch here. Put those back together, try to at least, and stick them in here. I'm going to pull this clutch arm off. On this clutch arm there is a notch, a little dent knocked in it. It needs to be lined back up when you go put it back together. I'll show you that, but it's on the side here. There's a little arrow, so just slide that thing off just like that. Stick that in your bag, and that's really about all I can take off right now. I'm gonna end up having to take this off anyway eventually, the kickstart, but I'll get the socket to get both of these nuts off, pull both clutches off, and then we'll be able to get in there to the oil pump, the cam chain, and all that stuff. So let me get the socket for these things. Cut the camera back on in a sec. Alright guys, I got these nuts loose. This one's actually reverse thread, so you have to tighten it up to get it to come off. These are 27 millimeters, both of them, this one and the other clutch. So they also have washers behind them right there. That one has outside stamped on it, so you make sure you put it back together, you get that right. This clutch here, the centrifugal clutch, is, I'm not going to say it's pressed on there, but you can't just pull it off. I see people online doing a bunch of different things with them, tapping them with hammers and all that. I like to just stick a 2-jaw puller on them, and my old 2-jaw here has seen its better days, so I kind of tighten it up by hand, and a lot of times you can just push down on it and it will actually pull the clutch off. They're not on there very strong at all, or like pressed on at all, or very hard at all. So if I can get this thing on here, pick up on it, and it'll sometimes pull off. Just because I got it on camera right here, it's probably not going to work. So let me hit it with the impact here and see if I can get it to pull off. It's coming now. I think it's about time to buy a new 2-jaw puller, because this one here, the darn shaft is wobbling so bad it won't hardly stay on the crankshaft. Yeah, there you go. So that's all it takes to pull it off. I usually keep all these together, the washer and the nut. Set that to the side. You have to take this guard off, 10 millimeter bolts. You have to take that off before you can remove the change clutch. So that actually holds the water pump on, one of those bolts. So guys, you're gonna have to excuse the radio. This outside Riker is just rambling like crazy out there. Alright, so we got that. Then you pull this off, same as the centrifugal clutch. Make sure this little shaft, or this little bushing, comes out with it, and set that in your box. I need to move these so I can get to them. You can't pull this other gear off until you move the oil pump. So with this guard off, there you go. Throw that in the box. Let me see if I can find the clutch guard. Find that in my cardboard. And then the next thing to do is take this oil tube off. There's a 10 millimeter bolt here, here, and here. And keep up with your O-ring up there on the top. And this one here is kind of a banjo bolt type deal. Got the hole in the middle of it. So that's that. Pull that off, and that will allow you to get the rest of the bolts for your oil pump. So there's that tube, and then another 10 here, 10 there, 10 there on the bottom, and that should be it for your oil pump. Stick them in the cardboard, and your oil pump will slide right off. Usually pulls this gear off with it because it's kind of wedged in there. There you go. Oil pump's off. Go ahead and pull this gear off. There's a washer on the back side of it. Make sure you hang on to that. Alright guys, last thing is this Allen head 5 millimeter pull that off. The little cup comes off. This other little piece, and I think these little pins will come out. And that one did. Can't get the other one out. There it goes. Alright, so pull all that out. I'm going to stick those in a bag because that'll be the first thing I lose. I'm also going to stick the oil pump and these collars right here for the oil pump. Stick them in a bag too because I'll also probably lose them if I don't do something with them now. So wiggle those out. Stick that in a bag with the oil pump. And should have everything off on this side. So.
Alright guys, we're going to put these O-rings in first.
That's a dowel.
A dowel in first.
We got a dowel in this hole here that Riker's working on. His head's a little bit in the way of the camera. Right there. One dowel. And then the other dowel goes in the other bolt hole.
Right here.
Right there.
And then you need to put this the oval ring.
O-ring.
O-ring.
Right there. Here.
Right here.
It snaps in that little groove there.
And then you need the oil pump.
The oil pump's next. And the gear of the oil pump meshes up with this the other remaining gear on the crankshaft. Just like that. And the little ears for the oil pump goes over those dowels that Riker put in earlier. I think he got them in there. But he knocked that one. Riker, you about to flip the camera over. He knocked the one dowel out. Let me stick it back in there. Didn't have it set in there all the way. So fits right in there like that. Now you put these 3 bolts in for your oil pump, and your oil pump's in. So cut the camera back on in a sec. Alright guys, we put this oil pump on a minute ago. You actually do need to put your crankshaft gear on first. If you're running a factory crankshaft gear, we're putting a gear reduction in this thing, so it will actually slide over top of the oil pump. But normally you need to install this oil pump after you put this crankshaft gear. And the crankshaft gear normally will have a washer on the back side of it, where in this case with this 60% reduction, you don't have that washer. So we're gonna go ahead and slide this thing on. Like I say, no washer, right over top of the crankshaft. I mean, right over the crankshaft and right over the oil pump, just like that. Slides on there perfect. This is a reduction from Reduction Boss Machining. That's Jeremy Lee out of Mount Olive, North Carolina. Does some good work. So that's the 60% reduction there. And we're going to install this basket on the back side. This is the larger gear on here. Got a smaller gear here and a larger gear here, so it reduces your transmission. There is got to be a couple things we got to trim here, like half of this bolt. I don't have the bushing in there right now, but I'll stick it in there and we can show that a little better. And then you also have to do some work on the reverse or neutral cap there. So I'll cut the camera back on once I get this clutch put together, and we'll see what we have to start trimming on this thing. Alright guys, like I said before, we're getting ready to start on this gear reduction on this thing. Got to get all the parts in here behind it before we can get the reduction started in. The next thing we're going to put in is this oil tube here. It goes in here like this here. Has some different bolts on it. Some banjo bolts and some normal regular 10mm headed bolts. So the banjos go here, and then you got a little short 10mm here on the bracket, and then a longer 10mm here. Also an O-ring on this end, so make sure you don't forget about the O-ring there. So let me get those tightened up, and then we will slide this hold on, this one here ain't going on too good, and I dropped it. We're going to slide this little cover, almost like a splash shield, that goes below the, or goes in front of the oil pump here and below the clutch. right here. Bolts in here like this. Let me see if I can find the bolts for it. Clutch guard, here they are. A little short bolt holds it in up here on the front side, and then you've got a longer one there on the back side. That one goes in there like that. The long one goes in here like this. Tighten those up. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to loosen this back up because I don't think that gear will get on there. So let me loosen this up, at least until we get the change clutch in there. Alright, I'm going to cut the camera back off now because I'm going to do a little bit for this gear reduction. You really won't have to do this on yours unless you're changing your clutches, but I'll cut the camera back on in just a sec. Alright guys, this is one step on the reduction. These kits that the Reduction Boss puts out, they normally send a set of clutch springs with them, especially on the bigger reductions he puts out, and that just keeps those clutch discs from slipping. Used to, they would recommend replacing these clutch discs, but I think now they just figured out they needed more pressure, not necessarily the friction material that was the problem. So the easiest thing on these is just loosen these up, kind of go around as you loosen them up, because it is spring loaded. Just back them off all the way, and then replace these springs that come with the reduction with the factory ones. So loosen it all the way up, pick that up, pull the 4 springs off, slide the 4 new ones on. Just like that. And tighten them back up. Start these with your hand first because this thing's threading into aluminum. And then also, as you tighten these up, it's best to go at a kind of a crisscross pattern, and don't go all the way down with them to start off with. You just try to torque them down. Alright, that's how you go. I think I've got a torque spec on those, maybe. Let me look here on my handy dandy manual. Yes, 12 Newton meters is what those call for, or for those English folks out there, 9 foot-pounds. 12 Newton meters or 9 foot-pounds. So I'm going to torque those down, and we'll jump to the next step. Alright, now what you want to do is just slide this clutch basket over. Make sure your teeth get lined up on your crankshaft gear. In this case, with this gear reduction, thing has a little lip on it, so you have to slide the gear out just a little bit to get it meshed up, and then slide it on to your shaft. And that's pretty much it for putting that on. If you're doing it stock, it should go right on there. You tighten your nuts up. I'm going to cut the camera off because we're going to jump to the gear reduction install. Alright guys, on this 60% reduction, you can see there's a clearance issue here with this bolt and the gear of the basket, and everything else looks like it's going to clear, except for maybe that little edge of the no, it's going to clear the edge of the oil pump. I mean, that's super close. So what I'm going to do is take a marker and mark across this bolt, just so I can keep a pretty close line. It doesn't look like much of it's got to be cut off, but I'm going to take a marker and a die grinder, and a cut-off wheel, and just cut that thing off. I think that's going to be the easiest and cleanest way to get this thing out. Shove some rags in here to keep the rest of the shavings out of the motor, but I am going to do that. So let me get it marked, get the grinder out, and we'll see what we can get cut off of it. I'll show you the finished product. Alright guys, so I just shoved a old rag in here, and the little sliver of the bolt head that I cut off is right here. It's a little bit hot, so I'm not going to pick it up with my hand. But it cut off pretty much just the flat side of the bolt, and I'm thinking that's going to be enough to get it to clear. Pull this rag out of here, all the metal shavings still on the rag, and then we're going to slide the clutch basket back over. So you got to slide that clutch gear back on there at the same time, and then get the splines to line up on your transmission gear here. There it goes, and it appears to be sitting down in there all the way, and you can see we just did clear that gear. If you do this on yours, you may have a little bit of trial and error, but you can see those things are like butter. The gears mesh up perfect. So the next thing we're going to have to do is work on this neutral cap. This is a little cup here that pretty much you can tell the grooves in it. This tells it when it's in neutral and when it's in reverse. There's some little push pins in the outside cover that are activated with this, and there's no way that I've seen that you can keep that neutral light working like it should. What you end up doing is having to ground it out, and I'll show that in a later video, or in a little later in the video. Ground it out to make the neutral light come on, or the four-wheeler won't crank. So we're going to have to cut this thing off, or cut a notch out of it, and let me get everything lined up here, and I'll get it cut back off. Alright guys, got the neutral cup, I guess you want to call that, in there. This was the way, I'm rebuilding this motor, so this is the way yours would probably look when you take it apart to put this reduction in, if that's all you're doing. So slide this thing back over there, and you should be able to tell where our conflict is between the two. Guess that's the word we'll use. So get our splines to line up. There it goes. Finally got it. Okay, so it's not spinning now naturally because we've got a issue there with the cup, and what we're going to end up doing is just cutting that cup off, and we need to leave it on there because it acts kind of like a washer. So we're going to take and cut off about half of the cup and remove this outer portion, and that will clear, because this thing's still got to drop down on there a pretty good ways. So let me get that off of there, and we'll cut it down and stick it back on and make sure it'll fit up. So give me a second, let me cut that off. Alright guys, this is what we cut off. See the little cup there? Just clamped in some vice grips and cut it with the porta band. You can about use anything to cut it with. So slide that back over your little pins, and actually since it's cut off with the clutch basket on there, you actually can install it while it's on there. So I'm going to put a little bit of Loctite on it, because sometimes these things tend to back out. Alright, little Loctite on there. Run that back in. I don't know where my had a Allen head that would go in my drill, and it failed a minute ago, and I ain't got a clue where it went, so we're going to do it the old-fashioned way. Alright, shifting gears as we do it. Alright, so there you go. Got that on there. Clears all the way around. See if I can get it to go back into neutral. By rotating this Allen head bolt. Kind of stuck in between gears there. Caught my finger in there. Alright, so we're back into neutral now. You can see where the stop is against the reverse lever. So with that cut off now, your neutral light nor will your reverse light work, but the only problem with that, reverse is not that big a deal. Most people know when they put it in reverse, to begin with, you have to push the little button down. So, but the other one is the neutral light. So you end up having to ground that neutral light wire where it ties into the outer cover, and that will make the neutral light stay on all the time, but it will always crank up too. So that's I guess a positive and a negative, that your light stays on all the time, but it really doesn't hurt anything. So we're going to tighten up this splash shield bolt here. That's pretty much it on our gear reduction install. Do need to put the nut and washer back on. This washer has outside stamped on it. Make sure that faces out. Got your nut here. I think this is 20. Let's see, 27 or either 24-1. I believe it's 27. Yep, that's a 27 millimeter nut. I'm not real sure what the torque spec is on that thing. I just torque it down good and tight with the impact, and that's always worked for me. One good thing about this thing is it is staked in there, so that makes it nearly impossible to back off. So hit this with the impact, and alright, good and tight. Still got some good, I reuse this nut. Sometimes they're not in shape to reuse, but this one here doesn't look too bad. So we're going to knock that back on there with a stake if I can find a hammer. Just hit the nut down at that little, in the notch, just like that. Alright, so that part's done. Now we need to get the centrifugal clutch. Let me cut the camera back on in just a second. Alright guys, now we're going to stick this centrifugal clutch on. It just slides right over this crankshaft. Get it lined up with your gear on the back, slides right down. Stick the washer on. It's got outside stamped on it. Make sure that faces the outside. And then tighten the nut up on this thing. Pretty sure these are reverse thread. Yes, they are. So I'll have to go to the left to tighten this one up. Just run it down until it stops spinning right there, and then grab you a little punch, stake that nut back down in there so that it doesn't back out. Alright, let's see if I can twist this thing up a little bit, because there ain't no telling what y'all can see. Actually, you can see pretty good. Alright, so that's in there good. Everything seems to be working fine. Alright guys, now we're going to try to stick this kickstart back in here. I do have the actual kickstarter still on here. That really helps to get it lined back up. What you got to do is, there's a washer on here. You've got to make sure this washer don't fall down in the motor. One thing. You also have to catch this spring here, the end of that spring, on a little tab up here. Once you get it shoved all in there, almost all the way in there, you have to catch this little tab under this little arm here, right beside the change clutch. So there's only about 10 things you got to get lined up all at one time, and I'm going to see if I can do it. Actually, I think it slid in there pretty well. Just pull it out just a little bit. I like to leave the end of that shaft in there on that hole, so it kind of pivots on it, and then just slide it all in there like that, just like that. Make sure it's pushed all the way in. That's all it takes. It does have a washer that I just dropped, pretty decent sized washer on that kickstart. So make sure you get that back on there. And then the next thing we're going to do is put the change clutch back together. There's some more parts that need to go on there. Start off with, we're going to put this little arm on here. there's actually a little dent knocked in it, and then there's an arrow cast into the case right here. You need to make sure that the dent and the arrow line up. I can't even see the dent. That looks pretty dang close there. So it should be pretty close to where it's about dead center of that change clutch, and it is. So next thing we need to do is put the little bearing and the bearing holder inside of the change clutch. Just bearing and bearing holder, they're not seated all the way together. There they are. Should be about flush. Stick that in there. Make sure it goes all the way down. It'll sit flush. Next thing to go in is going to be this little arm here. The end there that sticks off goes inside of that bearing that you just stuck in. Goes down on that, kind of rests on the arm that we put in. And then the last thing is going to be this piece with the 3 balls on it and a spring. The spring goes toward the inside. It kind of helps to hold everything on there, like that right there. And the very last thing we're going to stick on is going to be this washer. That shaft there does have a washer on the end of it. So that should be it. Everything's on there. Make sure you got your O-ring here. You got a dowel here and a dowel here. Get you a gasket. I'm going to put some RTV around this thing with the new gasket and get the cover cleaned out, which is pretty well clean over here. And then we'll stick this thing back together. So let me get everything cleaned up good, and I'll cut the camera back on right before I stick it all together. Alright guys, so I got a light cut RTV around this thing and the new gasket on there. Also put some RTV on the cover, and like I said before, you got a dowel pin here, a dowel pin here. Make sure your O-ring is on this piece here, your washer is here, and then the thing with the 3 balls on it goes in there too, as well as the washer, washer on the reverse shaft there. And then just slide this thing over it. Hopefully it slides right over. If you get all the shaft lined up, it will fit on there pretty good. So ease it down on there. Don't want to mess up your seal here or your seal on the reverse gear. So just tap it on. Hit the back a little bit, hit the front a little bit. I may stick some bolts in this thing because that gasket's not lining up exactly 100% perfect. So I'm going to stick some bolts in it just to make sure I got my gasket lined up, because I've done this before and the gasket will actually slide over to where it blocks the bolt hole off. You don't want that to happen. So I'm going to ease these bolts in here, tap it a couple more times with the hammer, and then I'll be able to tighten this up. I'll cut the camera back on the next step. Alright guys, so the very last step of this 60% install, gear reduction install on this 300 Fourtrax is to ground this neutral wire so that your neutral light comes on, because you remember earlier we cut the cup off of it, so your neutral nor your reverse light are going to work anymore. The only issue with that is if you switch the four-wheeler on and it's not in neutral, it's not going to crank. So that's really the only drawback to doing one of these reductions, is that your neutral light will stay on all the time. So what I'm going to do, just to show you how it works, is this plug here that goes into the side, it actually has an N and an R on it, naturally for neutral and reverse. If you ground the neutral side, the ATV is actually turned on right now, and you see we got no lights on the dash. If you ground this prong here, and I'm probably going to ground it to one of these case bolts down here, 10mm headed one, which is pretty close to the, down in there, pretty close to where the wire is. You see you got the green light on, and it'll actually crank now. So what I'm going to do is just cut this wire loose here and put a ring terminal on it. to attach it to this bolt. Move these wires out of the way. That bolt that you see right down in there, we'll attach that ring terminal right to there. And I'm not going to mess with the reverse light. I guess you just have to remember what gear you're in, or if there's any question of what gear, you just kick the shifter down until it gets into neutral, and then it'll crank up then. So, well, it'll actually crank up in any gear. Let me correct that. So no matter what gear you're in, it will crank up. So the reverse light, the reverse wire grounding it's really not going to do anything but leave your reverse light on all the time. So there's no sense in that. But let me cut this, ground it on. I will cut the camera back on just to give you a little final shot of what the end product looks like. Alright guys, so there's the finished product. It does have I did go ahead and attach the reverse cable on here, but you can see the blue ring terminal down there. You also want to hook back up your, that's the oil pressure or oil temperature sensor there. The other one is just hung under here for the reverse wire. You can cut it off if you want to, but I just decided to leave it on there. So now I just have to stick this little cover back on here with the 110mm bolt, and that will be everything buttoned up for the gear reduction. Alright guys, so check out my other videos. This, like I said, is a real good kid here from Reduction Boss. So check out my other videos, hit the like button, subscribe. Have a good night.